So we're all going to die, but not because of AI. And it's trained on all of our BS and poorly in some cases. And we have to be very careful. Like, how do we want to live? And what are the machine's roles going to be in helping us achieve that? Rather than, how do we respond to the latest airdrop of innovation from people building stuff we didn't ask for?
Welcome, everyone, to Make the Most. My guest today is Baratunde Thurston. I had the pleasure and honor of collaborating with Baratunde in the Wayback on the political blog Jack and Jill Politics, which you can find archived on C-SPAN, the Wayback Machine, and our first year in the National Library of Congress. Harnessing the power of his philosophy degree from Harvard, Baratunde's name has graced the likes of Vanity Fair and the UK Independent on the radio waves of WNYC and on the screens of news networks such as CNN, MSNBC, BBC, and, for extra flavor, Al Jazeera. His creative and inquisitive mind and his unique flair for infusing humor have made him a gifted producer, writer, and public speaker on the topics of race, technology, democracy, and climate. He is the esteemed host and executive producer of the PBS television series America Outdoors with Baratunde Thurston, creator and host of How to Citizen with Baratunde, which Apple named one of its favorite podcasts in 2020, and a founding partner of the new media startup, Puck. His comedic memoir, How to Be Black, is a New York Times bestseller. I'm in it, by the way, as a guest star. In 2019, he delivered what MSNBC's Brian Williams called, quote, one of the greatest TED Talks of all time, y'all. Baratunde serves on the boards of Civics Unplugged and the Brooklyn Public Library and lives in Los Angeles, California, or so rumor would have it. Welcome, Baratunde.
Hello, my sister Cheryl. Good to see you again. Thank you for welcoming me.
Thank you for being here. Well, we are living in very exciting times.
Too exciting. Somebody needs to turn down the excitement.
It's so exciting. There's a lot going on. As of this taping, finished July 4th. You always read, a really important speech or letter that happened by Frederick Douglass every year. Why do you do that, Baratunde?
I have been reading What to the Slave is the 4th of July by Frederick Douglass, a should-have-been founder of these United States. I found this text actually when I was writing How to Be Black, thanks to pre-Elon Twitter, which still wasn't great, but it was better. And there was a fellow Black Twitter person, Professor Blair Kelly, who shared this, Dr. Goddess, who shared this with me, and it lit me up. And I did a staged reading, and this must have been 2011. And I did another one at the Brooklyn Public Library. I've done virtual ones. Sometimes I just post the audio of the previous ones I've did because we have recording technologies available to us now, which is really nice. And you ask why? Because there's wisdom in it. There is comedy and fire. There is judgment. But mostly there is a deep calling to the nation to be what it has promised to be. And a celebration of independence is impossible for all who have lived here because of the unequal application of law and custom here, because of the superiority complex some have had here in setting up the rules to advantage some over the others. So Douglass stands as a reminder of our failures and of our potential successes to live up to the lofty words that helped birth this particular nation. I have had some updates, to that historic text, not new words from Douglass, but new words from the founding moment that are really alive for me right now as we think about independence and what that means. a society that wants to put the burden of collective needs on individual willpower. That's too much independence. We are also interdependent, and that is worthy of celebration. But more specifically, Cheryl, Douglass is this parallel historical moment. I have become more deeply aware of another one that is even more literal to the founding of this nation, and that would be, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, 5 indigenous nations who literally cajoled the founders into founding. They were running around as independent colonies, divided and conquered by King George, and the people already here who are already practicing democracy with rule of law and separation of powers and a matriarchal system, a will of the people, all this stuff codified. It was really beautiful stuff that was happening before we got carried away. They encouraged these colonists to think as one. And so much of what we call American values are literally, documentedly indigenous values. And so there's a new text that I'm reading every 4th of July. That is the texts of the Haudenosaunee. That is their Thanksgiving address. That is the letter that an Onondaga chief, delivered to the colonists in 1744, before there was any United States of America, helping it to become one. So there's a really, really, really beautiful legacy that's already here. Democracy was native to this land and to the people who were closest to this land. And if we remember that, we have a better chance at living it. That's why. That's the same answer for Douglass.
Oh, I can't wait to hear it. I know you featured, you've spoken to a lot of indigenous people also in your show, America Outdoors. And I come from a culture where we were encouraged not to talk about our indigenous heritage. My grandmother literally told me, never tell anyone, quote, because nothing will come of it. Yeah. And she was half Piscataway, which isn't even recognized as a federal tribe. It recently became recognized as a Maryland tribe, and my other grandmother was half Cherokee. So that's actually a good slice of Native Americanness, and it's been interesting to actually tease out that part of my heritage and what I can learn from it. As the nation determines. We live here in California, and I think one of the things that has taken place is a lot more respect for indigenous people's care of the land, particularly when it comes to fire management. Mm-hmm. And there's, it's talked about as tradition, but really it's science, right? It's actually science that they do.
Yeah. There was a lot of good stuff here, and it's still here. There are a lot of good ways of being, and they're still in practice. There are a lot of good people, and they're still around, despite systematic efforts to the contrary. So I wish you well on your journey, in your own family tree with finding more of that story. And I wish us all well on our collective journey to find our family tree and connect with all of our relations here, because we are lost. We're looking for something, and it's right there. It's right there underneath our feet.
It is right there. So, we're talking about different traditions, different, ethnicities, and how, when you combine all of those, you get something like America, right? Like the Constitution. One of the things that is happening in our world of startups is that there's a real attack on DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that is interesting and strange because even though Edward Bloom is powered by an angry ancient old billionaire and who's trying to restrict DEI, actually at least 70% of Americans support the notion of DEI in the workplace, according to a recent Washington Post Ipsos poll. We know from all the studies that have been done that diverse-led firms are more innovative, they are more productive, they are more profitable, they are more capital efficient, in part because they have to be often, and when they exit at higher multiples. So it's actually good for the bottom line to have, as many different perspectives. Why do you think, Baratunde, that that there is a tiny group of people who would like to roll back progress on DEI, particularly when it comes to the business world?
Change can be very difficult for people to integrate. And facts, supportive data is rarely enough to instigate and sustain change. It will happen. The question is how far behind the ball we're going to be when it does. How much money we're going to leave on the table. How much brilliance are we going to leave sidelined? How many innovations, how many dope products and services, how much insight and wisdom will we miss out on because of fear? I think people are resisting this because it is a change in power and because they have very small imaginations and they cannot imagine what their experience will be like if they are not above someone else. It terrifies them. And they're so practiced at subjugating or being the beneficiary of subjugation, they assume that they'll now be on the receiving end of subjugation. It's what so many of them know. And so they're like, well, if they're anything like me, this is not going to be fun for me. I gotta dominate harder. And so you end up with effectively minority rule on an issue that you cited has 70% support, but a vast minority is going way out of the way to ensure that we literally can't even talk about it. Banning words, removing letters from the keyboard. No ESG, no DEI, no CRT. You're not gonna be able to communicate nothing. It's gonna be like, it's $50 for that vowel. What is going on here? But that absurdity is not rational. It's emotional. It's psychological. It's identity. And if your identity is implicitly, and this is like the slippery part, it's like subconsciously wrapped up in dominance, then the lack of dominance is a great offense. It's a great affront to your position, to your purpose. And combating that and adjusting that will take more than studies. Really, people are afraid, people lack imagination, and they're clinging to an old story that's really, really tiny. If you think that, here's what I've done a lot of talking on this stuff, so it's hard for me not to fall back into like talk mode. I'll really try to avoid that with you. But there is a moment that I felt some sympathy for the people who are afraid, in particular around this DEI stuff. And it was when I remembered that I'm a man and not just black, right? And that I was born into some story of dominance and superiority that I didn't actively choose, right? It's like, it's my version of I never owned slaves, right? It's like, okay, I could technically, like, I feel you. Like, definitely that was not legal. You're saying it like you maybe wanted to, but in my case, I have benefited from systems of oppression. I have not always challenged those benefits. I don't always want to see them. There's some shame associated with that. But I had to get over it. And it wasn't just as simple as that. It was me thinking about something as simple as like the pay gap. Men and women, similar jobs, not getting similarly compensated. And when you hear that, and when I hear that as a man, I'm like, you want to give a woman my money? Hypothetically speaking, right? But I can identify with the territoriality, the fear of loss, the challenge to me in my place. Okay, maybe men in general, but I'm a specific man who's worked hard for everything I've gotten. Sound familiar, right? I was like, oh, I've heard these arguments before. Different shades, same dynamics. What changed for me in that male dominant story is when I started thinking about my wife. And I was like, if my wife gets more money, we have more money. Our house has more money. She could take us out to dinner. She could buy me those shoes I've been wanting. And it is that expansion of the imagination, the expansion of the sense of self, that is part of, I think, how you might overcome some of the resistance, because the psychological knee-jerk reaction, it's not insane. It's just not helpful. And there's a place for that instant reaction. And then there's a maturity to move through it, to move past it into the wider world that we're living in, the one where the profits are higher and the multiples on the acquisitions are higher and the capital efficiency, like all the stuff you know. But it's hard. It can be very hard for us to see that stuff if doing so challenges the story we have of ourselves. And there's a lot of people in America who don't want to be challenged. And they're really afraid of the story of themselves changing because they can only imagine it getting worse. And they need to be reminded it can actually be a lot better. Like, we're all settling right now. If you think this is the best we can do, if this is the thing you want to preserve and hold on to, set your sights a little higher, right? We should want more. So that's a partial answer. It's a big question.
No, it's a big question. And, look, in a world where Black women in America are launching new businesses at the highest rate of any demographic, including white men, and yet they are the least capitalized.
Yeah.
Right? I think that's a lack of imagination right there, right? Where, something is trying to happen, right? And yet, Adam Smith's invisible hand is tied behind the nation's back, in my opinion.
Ooh, okay. I see you making the most of these words. Yes.
I went to college. It was a different college than you, but
it's okay.
It was Yale. It wasn't Harvard.
You didn't have to name them, but there we are. All right. Now it's an Ivy Negro battle. Cool. That'll make us relatable.
Totally relatable. Totally. Barack Obama also went to the Ivy League. So, okay.
Yeah.
You are funny. You said some funny things. When you were talking just now, you have a way of injecting humor, into tough topics, like race, an increasingly complex American culture. I mean, why do you think comedy is so important in these times, for these conversations? And, can comedy create more community or more understanding and maybe reduce some of the political violence where
you're asking a lot for comedy.
Maybe. Can comedy help in any way?
You're gonna have to double comedy's pay if you want all that. Like, can comedy end climate change and roll back the options. Trump tax cuts? Can comedy give us reparations and give indigenous people their land back? And
can comedy ice my beer? Is that, I mean,
comedy can ice your beer. That's for sure. There are some things that comedy is very capable of doing. I am drawn to comedy as a selfish act of survival and sense making in a chaotic environment. I love the intellectual play of just like finding an unobvious reference that feels obvious only after it's stated. I think there's been times in my life in communications where the strategic placement of a joke or something that could pass for one is just helpful. It helps build a bridge and a connection between people who might not have it, or for whom that connection is enhanced because there's a shared moment of joy. And laughter is a disarming thing, and it's a non-cognitive thing most of the time. So it's this embodied experience of human connection that is very hard to deny. It can be abused like all power. It is not universally used to express good things, nor is all art or writing or video, right? So it is not like intrinsically the answer. But I think it has a place, as does most art, in helping communicate, especially in times where there's so much misunderstanding and so much misinformation. And as for political violence, that's going to take more than jokes. I think jokes are possibly an ingredient. I don't even know if they're necessary. They're certainly not sufficient. They could be additive to helping us have a human perception of one another. Violence is much easier when you don't see your opponent as human. That's the case for serial killers. That's the case for domestic violence. That's the case for gangs. That's how war works. It's part of the education to dehumanize. It's easier to kill. And so political violence is in that long tradition of violence as a result of dehumanization. So anything we can do to rehumanize and to see one another and to experience one another as somewhat like ourselves, if we're laughing at the same thing, that's a possibility. If we are sharing the same space, if we are fighting the same boss character in a video game, if we are trying to, hike the same trail, cross the same river, literally, then there's increased potential for a shared sense of humanity, decreased odds of dehumanization, which is a precondition for the type of political violence that we are in. It's not like a risk, it's a reality. It's already here. We've had so many spikes and so many types of crimes. We've had excuses made for it from people who know better and are using it for selfish power or profit or both. And it's also, helpful for us to understand when we're being manipulated. If someone's making you feel like another person isn't a person, ask yourself, why would they want me to feel like that? What do they gain from me feeling so distant from my fellow human being? And challenge that incentive. The first step is to be aware of it and to recognize things aren't just happening. There are folks doing things and they have consequences. And so let's move up the chain a little bit as well and be more diligent about what's ending up in our fields, what's ending up on our screens and in our minds.
No, I can dig it. I think that comedy as a rehumanizer,
yeah,
in a dehumanizing time, is very powerful. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thanks for that.
Speaking of risk, a lot of people might not know that you are a late night host. You host a web series called Lenovo Late Night, where you speak with tech giants and talk about the internet, the future, AI, green IT, all that jazz. Have you heard of the Oopsie scale? Have you heard of the Oopsie scale? So the Oopsie scale was created by a couple of friends of mine. It stands for the Irvi Pariser, as in Eli Pariser, Security Index. It's pronounced Oopsie. I killed everyone. And it's about AI and the risk that AI potentially can have. So the Oopsie scale is on one axis, 1 to 10. Basically, is AI going to kill us all? Like, it's going to be fine. 1, 10, we're all going to die. Human civilization over in 10 years. Where are you 1 to 10?
So we're all going to die, but not because of AI. I don't know where that falls on the scale, but I will say
that's 10. I think that's 10. That's
yeah, because I think we're going to kill ourselves before the robots ever have a chance to get to us.
Okay, so then the other axis is A to Z. Mm-hmm. If whatever happens, is it because of human misuse, A, or at the far end, Z, rogue superintelligence? Now, I will tell you, I'm a 5G. Get it? Do you get it, everybody?
Yeah,
5G? Yeah. Civilization has survived a lot, like the bubonic plague, right? Life will go on one way or another. People will figure it out. But just from my IT days, from my tech support days, I know that humans are usually the problem. So that's why I lean towards the A and not towards the Z. But where are you, Baratunde?
Yeah, I definitely, I'm on that blame humans first tip. And even when the machines do it, you can blame humans for it. Part of machines. Yeah, exactly. And it's an after school special turned up to 11. Like the machines are like, I learned it from watching you. And it's trained on all of our BS and poorly in some cases. And we have to be very careful. So here's how I see the sweep of stuff that I've been like trying to think about and work on for 20 years. I'm starting to make sense of my whole life, Cheryl, and you're gonna get the self-therapy.
Okay.
So
yeah.
there's like, I mostly just tell stories. I don't build a ton of things. When I do, they're like storytelling companies. And all those stories about interdependence, right? How do we live together? How do we relate to the natural world? How do we relate to each other as humans? How do we relate to technology and to the machines? And so I'm about to launch a project. By the time this drops, the trailer and teaser should at least be out. So the name is good to share. It's a video podcast. It's called Life with Machines. And we're asking these questions, but from life first. Like, how do we want to live? And what are the machines' roles going to be in helping us achieve that? Rather than, how do we respond to the latest airdrop of innovation from people building stuff we didn't ask for? Right? That is not a sustainable way to evolve as a culture, as a civilization, to have our needs met, and to maintain our connection to each other in the natural world, which is super important. So I play with the machines. I love them. They take notes for me in meetings. That's pretty cool. All that's going to get subpoenaed one day. I'm going to regret it. I'm going to regret it. I know I'm going to regret it, and I'm still doing it. It's like, so that's me, right? I'm announcing that. And we have some really important questions to ask ourselves about what do we want in this life? How do we want to get it? And how do we want to make sure that we're not losing our humanity in the process of inviting these machines to join us on this journey? It's a really, that question is not answered yet. I don't have a prediction. I got a ton of questions that I hope can nudge us toward a better answer than if we're not asking them at all and just, falling back on defaults and other people's choices and their desire just to make money, which is never enough for a full, thriving human life.
No, and that's why, I speak to a lot of nonprofit leaders and mission-driven, entrepreneurs, and I'm writing a book myself called AI for Nonprofits. It's all about, providing practical, tactical information, frameworks, usage for nonprofit leaders as they're trying to live life with a new set of machines. So. Yeah. I think that things are going to change for sure. But the question is, rather than being afraid, right? How can we embrace, a new world?
So then we might be asking slightly different questions. And that's cool too. Like, how can we embrace when and how deeply we want to?
Yes.
Because there's the inevitability argument. It's just not good enough. It's just, like, we've been there before and we've experienced some amazing upsides and some atrocious downsides. You want to talk about political violence, right? Unleashed disinformation, social media has something to do with that. Why don't we see each other? Because we're in algorithmically determined silos, putting us in buckets distinct from each other and monetizing our rage. So we know that. So what are we going to do with that knowledge too, and make sure that it's a healthy embrace? Because sometimes the embrace, it's like a chokehold. Like one party feels like it's an embrace, the other one can't breathe. We can't be doing that. So we want this like loving embrace, right? We want this consensual embrace. We want this joyful embrace where we are supported and supporting. And I think the good news is I think it's possible. And I know we have to like step up our sense of our own power and agency to co-create this stuff, and that it doesn't just happen. It just doesn't. Like, fairness doesn't just happen. Justice doesn't just happen. Compassion, these are things we have to invest in, because certainly folks are investing in greed and they're investing in subjugation. They're investing in power differentials. So we want a beautiful counter narrative and counter force to that as these machines come online, because we're raising them. And my friend Dr. Sam Rader talks in these terms. She's like, there are kids we have to be like good AI parents, is what she says. And that's like, because they're so literally built on things we've done and said, then we got to be very mindful of what we do and what we say. Because all that literally is going to come back to us in ways that are not metaphorical. They are modeled, right? And that's not something we're quite used to. But we're going to have to get used to it quick.
I think the question in part is balance, right?
Yeah.
How do you have a healthy balance, but that respects human beings, that respects nature, that benefits nature and human beings,
Yeah.
using these tools. Speaking of nature, you're part of a cool new limited series called Hope in the Water, which is described as a character-driven nature series focusing on sustainable ways to consume stuff like water-based protein, right?
Fish.
So, ish. Yeah, fish.
Well, not just fish, oysters and clams. I guess water-based protein, it just sounds so unappetizing when you say it like that.
Sorry.
Like, I don't want to. How's your water-based protein? You put some salt on that? Like,
let's fry up some water-based protein.
here's a better term: blue foods. Blue foods.
Yeah. Okay. Well, the episode that you specifically co-host, sees you traveling to a sustainable fishery in Puerto Rico. Why was it important for you to be a part of this effort? Which is, where can people find it?
PBS.
PBS.
You can find it in the PBS app. If you like spending money on hard cash, you can, I think, buy it off of Amazon Prime. But I think the PBS app is like the people streamer, and way less data harvesting if you're not so into that too. So recommend it. It's a great production. It's a greater story, and any production only gets like a piece of the whole, but ultimately, we're holding this tension of needing to preserve our oceans and our waterways and also feed ourselves. And we need to do both. How do we pull that off? It's already happening. And so this whole series, it's a bunch different hosts for different episodes. So you've got Martha Stewart, Shailene Woodley, and Chef Jose Andres makes an appearance in my episode. Because of his work in Puerto Rico, he's like part of the story that we're telling. And the story that we're telling is that folks have figured out many of the ways that we need to sustain life on this planet for ourselves and for the life that we depend on, as our neighbors and sometimes as our food. And I had a really adventurous time in Puerto Rico. It's beautiful to go to this space that we often forget, is a part of the United States, sometimes against its will. There's like, funky colonial history going on there. And part of their food challenge is dependence on imports, which makes no sense because they're an island surrounded by food. And so we found people who are building a healthier ecosystem of local, sustainable, in this case, squid fishing. And they're employing folks. They're working with local restaurateurs. They got nonprofit. They got scientists. They're retraining the fisher, population. And it's starting to work. And it tastes good. And they're making it local, to their dishes and to their food. So that one story out of the many that we told in the series resonates for me because it has a little bit of everything to remind us that all's not lost, that we actually know a lot of what we need to know to get ourselves out of this climate, the worst of this climate challenge. We will not escape it completely. That's too late. But we can reduce significantly the harm, and we can increase the opportunity and the joy and the delicious foods. So if you like good food, if you like living on Earth, check out Hope in the Water.
I love Puerto Rico. I really strongly recommend it to folks. Some of the most beautiful beaches in the world, and some of the most awesome people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah,
you sound really hopeful, Baratunde. And I'm hopeful too. As you know, I am a, relentless optimist, in part because I think we have no choice, and hope feels better than depression. How do you keep your hope alive, to quote?
Okay, Jesse.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not always hopeful. I'm predisposed to positivity, and that has served me, and I prefer that mode. But make no mistake, like, we're in times that are challenging that for billions of people, because of the decision of far fewer than billions of people, decisions of far fewer than billions of people. So yeah, my hope is challenged on a regular basis, and I'm not naive, and I don't want to behave foolishly in the face of real challenge, which we are all in at least one way, probably multiple ways. It's the polycrisis. So it is, I don't want to communicate the idea that like, yeah, I just feel great about our prospects. We're doing fine. Like, we're not actually doing fine. There's pockets of extraordinary, superlative, glorious success and winning. And there's chasms, of unnecessary, preventable, with foresight, suffering. We can do better. And to the extent that I still have a predisposition to hope is because I see that it's happening, right? It's not a theory. Oh, I wonder how we could make right our relationship with indigenous people. We said a nation of laws and we violated every treaty. Oh, look, the Yurok people got some of their land back. We could do that. Or I wonder how we could feed ourselves from the oceans and preserve them at the same time. All the native Hawaiians figured out the fish pond. The folks in Scotland got a marine protected area and actually had more fish because they protected it. Wait, what? So we've been known. And the story, is kind of where we started. It's not about facts. How we change things is not about facts. So I find hope in telling that story and like repeating it to invoke it and make it more real. We are what we eat. And I think we become the story that we consume about who we are. So part of the way forward and part of where I find my hope is like, all right, I'm finding a ton of these stories. How to citizen, people, active citizening, the hope in the water, the America outdoors, the indigenous joy, even the people doing tech, AI, nonprofits, AI for good. Like this is not just possible, it's actual. And the hope is in talking it up more, participating in it more, to give it a chance to grow as some of these other stories, are dying. Painfully so, but in some cases necessarily so.
No, and that's our theory at the Impact Seat Foundation is, kind of like that in Scotland, right? That pond, if you invest, where, with your beliefs, right? In the future that's trying to be born, we're all going to do better, right? If you actually capitalize Black women who are creating businesses, we all win. We just have a bigger, more prosperous economy.
Yeah.
So
Valerie Kaur says this, she did this in this 2017 poem, The Tomb versus the Womb, right? What if this darkness is not the darkness of the tomb, but the darkness of the womb? And like America's dying. No, America's being born. We're like a very incomplete experiment. Great ideas, imperfectly executed. And every day we get a chance to do it better and to do right by it, and not without pain. Childbirth, as you know, is full of pain. It's messy.
I had purpose.
Beautiful. That's what I'm talking about, and that's a perfect out. Right. I just saw the time. I'm gonna let you let us wrap. Thank you. I heard you try to do that. I had to quote Valerie.
No, thank you for quoting Valerie. I know you have a hard stop, so I want to be respectful of your time.
Yeah, I had the answer to the rest of the challenges, but we're just out of time, so we'll have to follow up, and I'll see if I can share that with the people.
That would be great. But you are amazing. I love, of course, watching you grow and your impact to help change the world for the better. Thank you so much, Baratunde, for joining us today.
Cheryl, I'm always proud of you, excited to reconnect with you. Thanks for everything you're doing, and thanks for sharing your stage with me. Making the most. The most. If you need a theme song, make it the most. Making the most. Yeah. It's a terrible theme song. Don't use it. Don't use it. Pretend I said that. I'm so sorry.
Making the most.